Yeah, morning everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm going to touch upon and share my thoughts about multifocal toric IOLs. It's not something that is established in the sense that I think we had only 3 or 4 papers in the literature on multifocal torics so far. I have no financial interest in any of the materials mentioned in this presentation. It's already been highlighted that almost 1/3 of all our patients who come for cataract surgery have pre-existing astigmatism. And these days, modern cataract surgery has become another form of refractive surgery. Our patients expect a lot more. Long gone are the days when they just wanted good distance vision without having to resort to glasses. They also want good near vision. And these days, they also want excellent intermediate vision, which allows them to use computers and do other things. So patients' expectations have gone a lot higher, and we need to meet those expectations. So it's with that view in mind that people have started coming out with multifocal torics. So basically, you are getting rid of the presbyopia, you're getting rid of the cataract, you're getting rid of the corneal astigmatism as well. And quite a few of my patients are patients with refractive lens exchange. There's no cataract, they have high astigmatism, they are past 45 years of age, and they want something done. So more and more I'm coming across patients wanting refractive lens exchange, in which I'm using this particular kind of lens. It's been mentioned that children over 12 years of age can also have these lens implants. Compared to monofocal torics, where you can get away with one diopter or more than slightly less than one diopter of astigmatism, but here with multifocals, you have to be even more precise. Even one diopter of astigmatism can compromise with the visual benefits of a multifocal, basically because there is division of light energy into near and focus distance, and that causes problem with contrast sensitivity. So if the multifocal is reducing the contrast sensitivity, and on top of that you have a residual astigmatism, it's going to compromise the results of your surgery. This is the lens implant that I've been using for the last 3 years. It's basically a refractive multifocal lens called Lentis M+. I have no financial interest in this lens. And based on this model, they have come out with a toric version, which I've been using in a few of my patients. It is rotational asymmetry. That means the reading segment, which is inferiorly placed, has to be placed vertically. So the orientation of the lens is vertical always. It has hydrophilic material, but has a coating of hydrophobic, so it's a kind of hybrid composition, which gives you best of both the worlds. A biconvex aspheric surface, which basically implies you got to center it perfectly, otherwise you will have problems. And it's got customized toric surface. It doesn't add on to your pre-existing spherical aberrations like Tecnis lenses and other lenses, and it doesn't depend on the size of the pupil. Though with very small pupils, we do have a problem with this lens. And as I said, it has a 3-day near segment compared to 3.75 or 4 diopters with some of the other lenses. This is the shape of the lens. As you can see, the marks of the axis, where the axis has to be placed in relation to the limbus, are already there. So you just have to insert this lens vertically via superior incision, or if you're going by temporal incision, you need to move it superiorly so that the near segment is inferior and the axis marks are aligned with your marking preoperatively. It fits in very nicely with all kinds of capsular bag diameters because it's got an overall diameter of 11 millimeters, and because it's placed vertically, it fits very snugly with the capsular bag, even in high myopes, where the capsular bag diameter can be a little higher. So there is less chance of it moving or misalignment, and because it's a plate haptic, it is less likely to move anyway. So it is a lot more stable in terms of its misalignment. Since I've shifted over from C-loop to plate haptic version, I've not had a single case in which I've had to go back and reposition the lens. There are the images don't jump when you look from near to the distant segment. And compared to some of the diffractive models, I've not had one case in which we've had permanent night vision problems like glare, halos, or starbursts. And we can use this in younger patients, even if the pupil is very large. As you see in young high myopes, we can still use this lens. More than anything, even in low illumination levels, it gives you very good contrast sensitivity because not much of the light is being lost when conversion from distance to near focus. So how do we go about preparing the patient when we are considering this lens implant? Of course, the usual examination of the eyes with measurements of all the parameters like uncorrected near vision, distance vision. Counseling is the most important thing in these patients because you need a lot more chair time. You need to prepare these patients accordingly, make sure that you dampen down their expectations, and also you made them prepared for any touch-up or other procedures which you may have to undertake later on. I usually use Aladdin for my auto-reflection, autokeratometry, and corneal topography because it gives me both now. I've shifted over from other keratometers to Aladdin, which is made by Topcon. Again, no financial interest. And you can also use any of the other things. Ultrasonic biometry, especially the contact type, if you are using that, do not use any multifocals, do not use any multifocal torics because you will never get it right. Because your excellent measurements and all those things are going to be very imprecise and the results will not be very predictable. And if you are using an immersion contact biometry, immersion ultrasonic biometry, warn the patient that patient may not get the optimum result. I always do an OCT in this kind of lens because these are premium implant lenses, they pay a lot more, so you need to be even more precise. So it's my routine. If you have OCT, if you not, at least do a proper fundus evaluation with dilated pupils. Quite a few of these patients are in elderly age group, have dry eye syndrome. I always pre-treat them with lubricants before I do my keratometry because I've found that using lubricants pre-operatively can change the keratometry and make it a lot more precise and accurate. And I always start these patients on topical non-steroidals to prevent any post-operative cystoid macular edema, even though the incidence is a lot less than it used to be. Amblyopia. Conventional wisdom is don't use it for amblyop. I have used it for mild amblyopes, 6/12 in the worst eye, and I've had good results. But you have to warn these patients that the binocular vision compared to uniocular vision may be slightly worse, but they still do very well. And of course, I've already mentioned about the possible things that can go wrong. So if you are preparing them with these things, you know that they are aware that they may need a touch-up procedure, whichever it is. They are better prepared, and in case things don't go right, they don't complain too much. Large angle kappa, which you see in quite a few hyperopes. This has been the bugbear of multifocal lens implants, especially when it causes a lot more night vision problems. So if you have a large angle kappa, you can still use this particular lens implant, but you need to rotate the near segment slightly towards the nasal side like we do with our ordinary multifocals or varifocals or bifocal lenses. And if you have access to Tecnis multifocal toric, that would be an ideal lens if you have a very large angle kappa. Because I use this lens, I have to go to their online calculator, and it's a very user-friendly software program. And as we've already mentioned about surgically induced astigmatism, if you have IOL master, put in 30 to 50 patients, put in their K values pre-op and post-op, using the same lens implant, same incision, and you will get your own surgically induced astigmatism, rather than depending on which keratome you are using. That's 2.2 will give you, 2.4 will give you 0.4. That's all right, but it's not very precise. It's always better to have your own surgically induced astigmatism based on your own individual technique. Again, you're using a constant because you need a given spherical equivalent. So when you do IOL master on these patients or whatever optical biometry you're using, you have to have your own A constant. And it's always better to either use the ULIP website A constant for this particular lens, or you individualize your A constant by using your own surgeon's fudge factor, and that's what I do. And this gives me a more accurate outcome. We talked about K values just now. I've shifted on to Aladdin because it gives you 1,000 measurements takes two concentric circles and gives you a lot more central corneal diameter to take values from. So it's a lot more precise than IOL Master, which gives you very, very small area in the center of the cornea, which may not correspond to your visual axis. So this works better for me at least, but of course manual K is the gold standard. And there are situations when your K values vary between, we also discussed that very briefly. If they are different from auto K, I normally take an average of the two and compare it with the refractive cell. There are situations when your K values, auto K or whatever, vary with your refractive K values. So what might be the reason? The reason might be patient may be having tilted optic disc syndrome, where you have additional astigmatism caused by the infero-nasal scleral ectasia, which you see in these patients. So you need to be careful. If you have refractive cylinder more than K, toric multifocal or toric IOLs are not going to correct the whole of astigmatism. You have to warn the patient that patient may need maybe LRIs or astigmatic keratotomy post-operatively once the patient has stabilized. I normally take axis of the cylinder from auto K or topography. That's more accurate than IOL Master K readings. And my aim is to usually, in very hyperopic eyes, aim for minus 0.25 and emmetropia in others. Again, depending on which axial length you have to use an appropriate formula, and that will give you a lot more predictable result compared to SRKT in all the patients. It doesn't work like that. Based on your axial length values, you need to use an appropriate formula. This is the online calculation chart. You need to enter your values, which we already talked about in detail. I used to use this, but I've shifted on to slit lamp because I found slit lamp is a lot more accurate than using a bubble marker. You get a printout, a transparency, when they send you the lens. So you put it on the screen like orthopods do when they have their scans on the projector screen. So you put it there. You cannot go wrong because right in front of you near the microscope, you know where your toric axis is. So you mark your axis 0, 180, 90 and the toric IOL axis with your pen, or you can scratch the surface and make sure that this is in front of you when you are doing it. It also tells you which incision you have taken, what is your surgically induced astigmatism. It's all built into this calculation. You don't have to do anything. My technique is to use always a superior incision because it's a plate haptic lens. Rotating from a temporal to superior is a nightmare, a plate haptic lens. So I always use a superior incision. I know my SIA. I go from the top, just insert the lens. Usually I don't have to rotate much. Usual technique of phacoemulsification, we already covered that. Just remember that your surgically induced astigmatism is going to be a lot less if you go temporally, but again, if you're using a plate haptic, it's technically a lot more difficult. It's very important that you have a very central, proper rhexis, which is about 5 to 5.5 millimeter. An eccentric rhexis can cause problem with lens centration. And CTR, capsular tension rings, it's a contentious issue. Some people swear by it, that you have to, if you are using a multifocal, you've got to have a CTR. I don't use that. And you have to, of course, align the lens. It goes without saying that even a small misalignment can cause a lot of problem. You can lose the effect. The usual cause for misalignment post-operatively is if you left any viscoelastic behind, because it makes the lens rotate. If there is no viscoelastic, and that's why the idea of using hydro insertion is very, very, very nice. If you allow the AC to become shallow post-operatively, the lens can move. So make sure you have a very watertight wound. And if you make a too small rhexis, we all know that you can have all those problems, including the decentration, tilt of the lens. And if you end up with a posterior capsular rupture, abandon the procedure. Just make sure you leave aside your ego that you spent so much money, made the patient spend so much money. Don't touch it. Just do an ordinary monofocal. If you want, you can do LRIs, astigmatic keratotomy. I normally don't prefer to. If I have a PCR with vitreous loss, I don't use a toric IOL. You can't put it in the sulcus. It won't stay fit, and as it is, it's a plate haptic single piece lens. It's not supposed to be put in the sulcus. So I abandon my procedure usually. Post-operatively, of course, you have to dilate the pupils, make sure where your axis is, and confirm it with your slit lamp by positioning the slit lamp, and make sure your axis is right, especially if the patient is not at anticipated result, patient still is not very happy. Always use post-operative lubricants, that's what I always do. And if I found that patient is having problem with intermediate vision at 2 weeks, I undercorrect the other eye. So never do both eyes together. And if you have a spherical error which is still there, I've used on odd occasions a Sulcoflex ciliary fixated lens. Not had to do any IOL exchange so far. And usually night vision problems are seen if there is decentration, posterior capsular opacification, or dry eyes, or if there is any misalignment. And these are my results. 100% of my patients became spectacle independent with this lens implant. I've done quite a few of these. These are some of the issues that we need to touch upon before and after the surgery. Patients may have amblyopia because of meridional amblyopia seen in very high astigmats. And I've already talked about tilted optic disc syndrome. Make sure you always compare your refractive cell with your phase cells. And if there is a problem like tilted optic disc, do not consider multifocal toric. Which eye to do first? I always do the dominant eye first. Because of the binocular rivalry, if you do non-dominant eye first, and if the patients keep doing this, they are not very happy, especially if both eyes are open. And if the non-operated eye happens to be the dominant eye, they don't appreciate the good result unless you make them see separately. I've not had to do any post-operative touch-ups like astigmatic keratotomy. But if you want, you can go on this website called astigmatismfix.com. When you end up with a residual astigmatism, it tells you what to do actually. Of course, you have to use your own judgment. Wait for about 3 months before you consider YAG capsulotomy, because otherwise you can end up with a bit of CME. Reading speed is something that we normally neglect, and you would find that with multifocal toric, your reading speed typically increases by 20 to 30%, at least in my patients. Normally I would have, let's say, 110, 120 before surgery. They will reach about 130 words per minute using just ordinary typograph, and they do very well. And I've not had any problem with glare halos or starburst, especially using this lens implant. But if you have, usually ask the patient to persevere, have a bit of patience, and usually it settles down.